They told me my brother earned everything: the house, the money, even the family's future. I smiled through the announcement, pretending it didn't shatter me. But a month later, my phone lit up at 2 a.m. It was my mother, whispering like it was normal. "Sweetheart, can you cover the taxes on your brother's new house?" That was the moment I knew. It wasn't just about inheritance. It was about control, about watching me bleed dry while he thrived. What would you do if your family disowned you, then begged you to pay for it? I didn't hang up. The phone rang at 2 a.m., pulling me out of the shallow kind of sleep you only manage when your life feels like it's crumbling. I didn't need to check the caller ID. I already knew it was her. My mother's voice always carried the same blend of urgency and disappointment, as if I owed her my breath. "Sweetheart," she sighed, drawing out the word like it was a rope around my neck. "Your brother has been working so hard, but things are tight. Could you transfer something just to help him get through this month?" I sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling, phone pressed to my ear, feeling my chest tighten. To her, it was normal to wake me in the middle of the night with demands. To me, it was exhaustion, layered over years of unspoken obligation. I wasn't her daughter. I was her emergency fund, her therapist, her tireless safety net. If I was honest, I was nothing more than a battery she could drain whenever she needed a charge. Have you ever answered a midnight call you knew would leave you hollow, but you picked it up anyway? I did, every single time. I wanted to protest, to scream, to remind her I wasn't made of endless money or patience. But instead, I swallowed it, as I had done for years. And then it slipped out so casually I almost thought I misheard. "Your brother is the future of this family. He deserves the support." I froze. She didn't realize what she had confessed. For decades, I had convinced myself I was needed, that my sacrifices mattered, but here it was, the truth spilled like wine on white cloth. My role wasn't to be cherished. My role was to fund someone else's crown. That was the night the cracks widened, but it wasn't the first sign. Looking back, the red flags had been waving like fire in a dark field, and I had ignored them all. There were always 7 signs, though I never strung them together until it was too late. The guilt trips that started with, "If you really loved us, you would." The blatant favoritism that painted my brother as a golden child, while I was the shadow at the edge of the frame. The silence, the days my parents would freeze me out for saying no. The subtle ways they pried into my bank accounts under the guise of just helping with the bills. The sudden illnesses that appeared only when they needed my money. The gaslighting phrases, "You're imagining things," "Stop being dramatic," every time I questioned them. And the polished family photos that masked every crack, proof for the neighbors that we were perfect. If you're reading this, ask yourself, have you seen these signs in your own life? Have you mistaken control for love? I did, and it nearly cost me everything. The realization hit harder when I remembered the childhood promises. I was 8 years old when my mother once pulled me close, brushed my hair, and whispered, "One day everything will be shared equally. That's how families are." I had held on to that whisper like a promise carved in stone. It was the bedtime story that kept me compliant, that tricked me into believing every sacrifice was an investment for later. But as I got older, the whispers changed. They became corrections, subtle rewrites of the story. "Your brother works harder. He needs more. You should be proud to help him." And each time I nodded, convincing myself it was just what love looked like. The cruelest twist came not from what they said, but from what I discovered by accident. A bank statement left on the kitchen table, half covered by magazines. I shouldn't have looked, but my eyes caught the numbers. Transfers, consistent and large, traced back to the money I had given them. Money I thought was helping with groceries, with bills, with emergencies. But it wasn't. It was invested into my brother, his car, his business ventures, his education, his dream. I stood there, paper trembling in my hands, my heart splitting with betrayal. My mother walked in and saw me staring. She didn't panic. She didn't apologize. She just tilted her head and said, "It's for your brother. Don't you want him to succeed? Isn't that what family is about?" In that moment, the floor beneath me cracked. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation. Instead, I placed the paper back on the table as if it burned me, and I smiled because smiling was safer. Sometimes survival means hiding your fury until the time is right. I thought about the little girl who once believed her mother's promise. I thought about the teenager who skipped vacations to save money for the family. I thought about the woman I had become, carrying debt that wasn't mine, pain that wasn't mine, all to protect an illusion. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, realizing the truth. The day of sharing everything had come, but it didn't include me, and I whispered to myself, almost laughing at the cruelty of it. I never imagined the day they divided everything would arrive so soon, and I wouldn't even be in the equation. The dinner table was heavy with the smell of roasted turkey and wine, the kind of warmth families boast about during the holidays. I sat between cousins, smiling through my exhaustion, waiting for the obligatory toast. My father stood, glass in hand, clearing his throat. His words cut deeper than any knife on that table. "Tonight, we want to honor your brother," he said, his chest swelling with pride. "He has worked harder than anyone, sacrificed the most, and proven he is the true future of this family. That's why everything, our home, our savings, our legacy, will belong to him." For a moment, the clinking of forks and chatter froze. My smile held, but my throat ached with unshed tears. I pressed my nails into my palm under the table, forcing composure. My brother smirked, as if it had all been decided long ago. Around me, relatives nodded, clapped, even congratulated him. Not one pair of eyes turned toward me. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to demand why. Instead, I swallowed my rage like shards of glass and excused myself to the bathroom. In the mirror, my eyes were bloodshot, my face pale. I whispered, "Hold it in, just hold it in." What I didn't know was that someone else at the table had captured it all. A cousin, filming for memories, unknowingly recorded my parents' announcement, their betrayal preserved in pixels. Later, that recording would become the crack in their perfect facade. But that night, it was just me, shattering silently inside. I tried to sleep it away, but the ache lingered for weeks. Then, 1 month later, my phone rang again at night. I already knew who it was. "Honey," my mother cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We need a favor. The taxes on your brother's new house are due. Could you cover them? Just this once." My chest tightened, rage and disbelief twisting inside me. They stripped me of everything, and now they wanted me to pay for the crown they placed on his head. I pressed the phone harder to my ear, my voice steady but trembling underneath. "No," I said. For the first time in years, I refused, but I didn't hang up. If you were me, would you hang up or keep listening? I stayed on the line, letting her words unravel into guilt-laden pleas. I recorded every second. Something in me shifted. I was no longer their obedient daughter. I was a witness, a collector of evidence. That night, I opened a hidden folder on my phone and saved the call. The next morning, I began documenting everything: text messages, emails, bank transfers, voicemails. Each file was a brick, building the case they never imagined would stand against them. But I wasn't ready to confront them yet. I needed perspective, validation that I wasn't imagining it all. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I typed my story anonymously onto Reddit under the infamous Am I the Asshole Heseira forum. I poured every detail: the inheritance, the midnight calls, the demand for taxes on a house that wasn't mine. I hit post and waited. Within hours, comments flooded in. 10,000 strangers dissected my life, and for the first time, I felt seen. You're not crazy. You're being abused financially and emotionally. Cut them off. Protect yourself. Each word was a lifeline. I sat on my couch, tears streaming, my chest heaving with a mix of grief and relief. For years, I had been told I was dramatic, selfish, ungrateful. Now strangers validated the truth I had buried. I wasn't the villain. I was the scapegoat. I cried until my body ached, but they were different tears, tears of recognition. It was the first time I didn't feel utterly alone. And then came the message, a private inbox notification from someone I didn't know. The name was unfamiliar, the tone calm and professional. I read your story, it began. You're not imagining things. You're being manipulated, and I believe I can help you. I'm a lawyer. I stared at the screen, heart racing. The game had just changed. I never thought a simple email would change everything. One night, while searching through old shared accounts I still had access to, I stumbled across a folder tucked deep inside my parents' inbox. At first, it looked like boring financial records. But then, line by line, I realized what I was reading. It was my money. The deposits I had made over the years, supposedly for groceries or medical bills, had been funneled into an account under my brother's name. The subject line was blunt: investment for his future. My hands trembled as I clicked through. There were thousands of dollars, month after month, drained from me and gifted to him. I felt my throat burn, the betrayal cutting deeper than I thought possible. But then came the twist. The account wasn't flourishing the way my parents boasted. It was bleeding. Thousands lost in reckless ventures, bad trades, impulsive spending. My golden brother wasn't thriving, he was sinking. For years, I believed I had failed. Failed at saving enough, failed at being good enough, failed at carrying the family. But staring at those red numbers, I felt something strange: relief. The truth was brutal, but it freed me. I wasn't the failure. They were. My sacrifices had not built his empire. They had fed his ruin. I closed my laptop, sat in silence, and let the weight lift just a little. Pain still throbbed, but alongside it came clarity. I whispered into the empty room, so it was never me. It was never me. But the emails weren't finished. I scrolled further, heart pounding. Then I froze. Hidden in a thread between my mother and a relative, I saw words that chilled me. We'll make sure Hannah is written out before she turns 18. She doesn't need it. She'll always provide without asking. My stomach turned. They had planned this long before I was even an adult, long before I had the strength to fight back. I wasn't cut out in a sudden betrayal. I was erased years ago. And this time I didn't cry. I saved every file, every attachment, tucking them into a folder labeled simply Truth. I couldn't do this alone, and for the first time, I didn't have to. I reached out to the lawyer who had messaged me. His tone was steady, his guidance clear. Document everything. Don't confront yet. Build quietly. I followed every word, but I also knew I needed allies beyond the courtroom. That's when my aunt stepped in, the only one who had ever looked at me with softness instead of judgment. When I visited her, tea steaming between us, she didn't question my story. She nodded slowly, eyes filled with recognition. Then she confessed something I wasn't ready to hear. She too had been cast aside once, stripped of her share, silenced when she fought back. They did it to me, she whispered. I knew they would do it to you. Her words hit me like a second betrayal, but they also anchored me. I wasn't alone in this pattern. It was generational, a cycle of control and cruelty. But unlike her, I had the tools, the proof, and the will to fight. Another ally came unexpectedly. My closest friend from college, now working in banking, offered to trace the transfers. Within days, he provided a clean breakdown of where my money had gone. Every misstep my brother tried to hide. Numbers don't lie, and now I had more than emotions. I had evidence. Piece by piece, the puzzle formed. The aunt who had been silenced, the lawyer who was ready to fight, the friend who uncovered the financial trail. Each became part of my circle, my quiet rebellion. For the first time, I had a team, not a family by blood, but a family by choice. One evening, sitting in my aunt's living room, the soft clink of porcelain cups between us, I felt something I hadn't in years. Safety. To be believed, to be trusted, to be seen. It filled me with a fragile kind of peace. I let myself breathe, let myself be human, not just a strategist. We laid out the plan across the table like a battlefield map. The lawyer advised precision, my friend handled the finances. My aunt offered insight into the family's behavior. And together, we chose the day. A day where masks would be impossible to wear, where witnesses would surround us. Christmas. I traced my finger across the table, whispering the words aloud, letting them settle into my bones. On Christmas, we'll end this. My aunt met my eyes, her voice steady. They've taken enough from you. Now it's time for the truth. To take something back. The fire inside me no longer burned out of control. It was focused, sharp, and waiting, and in the back of my mind, one thought pulsed louder than the rest. They would never see it coming. The snow was falling thick outside, coating the streets in a soft white silence. Inside my parents' house, the Christmas tree glowed with carefully strung lights and ornaments polished to perfection. Laughter filled the room, brittle and forced, the kind of cheer families put on for show. I sat on the edge of the sofa, clutching the gift boxes I had wrapped with trembling hands. Inside each one wasn't a sweater or perfume or trinket, it was truth. Dinner stretched on. Stories of my brother's so-called achievements dominating the table. I barely touched my plate, my heart hammering louder than the silverware clinks. When the gifts were exchanged, I rose. My voice didn't shake. I have something for everyone, I said, handing out small boxes. My brother laughed, smug, already assuming it was another sign of my endless giving. They unwrapped in unison. Confusion crossed their faces as pages spilled into their hands. Emails, bank transfers, transcripts of calls. My mother's voice, recorded at 2 in the morning, filled the air from a hidden speaker in my pocket. "Your brother is the future. You'll always provide." Silence fell. You could hear the fire crackling in the hearth, the shifting of feet, the sharp intake of breath. My brother's hands shook as he flipped through the documents. His face drained of color, then twisted with panic. "This isn't my fault," he shouted, slamming the papers down. "They did it. They told me to take it. I never asked for this." Gasps spread around the room. Cousins exchanged glances. Aunts whispered. My father's jaw clenched. My mother's eyes blazed. The golden boy had cracked, his halo slipping before the audience they had always sought to impress. If you saw your family's lies exposed in front of everyone, would you stay silent or clap? No one clapped. No one defended them. My parents shot up from their seats, voices shrill, desperate. My mother shrieked, "You don't belong here. You're not even our blood." My father echoed, his face red with fury. "She isn't our daughter." The words hit like knives. For a split second, the room spun. But then I steadied myself. This was their final weapon. Discredit me, erase me, rewrite reality. I let the silence stretch, let the gasps ripple through the room. Then I spoke, calm and clear. "If that's true, then prove it." The weeks that followed blurred into chaos. They scrambled to smear me, whispering to relatives, planting rumors online. But the twist came swiftly. A DNA test I had taken months earlier, curiosity sparked by my constant alienation, confirmed without doubt. I was theirs, their child, their blood. Their lie shattered in public as easily as it had been spoken. The smear campaign grew uglier. Anonymous posts appeared online calling me ungrateful, manipulative, greedy. Fake stories painted me as unstable, but the tide turned in ways they couldn't predict. Strangers on the internet, thousands of them, rallied. We saw the recordings. We heard the emails. She's telling the truth. For the first time, I didn't have to defend myself. The truth defended me. And then came the night of quiet. Alone in my apartment, I scrolled through messages from people I had never met. Women writing, "Your story saved me from my toxic parents." Men confessing, "I thought I was alone until I read about you." I pressed the phone to my chest and cried. They were strangers, yet they believed me more than my family ever had. I wasn't invisible anymore, but relief didn't last long. The storm was only beginning. My parents and brother, cornered, tried to tighten their grip. They filed papers to secure assets, tried to hide funds, scrambled to protect what they thought was untouchable. But the evidence I had gathered was already in the hands of people who mattered. Lawyers, journalists, and soon the courts. One morning, an envelope slid under my door. Official, heavy, marked by the seal of justice. The government had opened an investigation into the transfers, the investments, the suspicious timing of deeds and wills. I held the letter in shaking hands, my breath caught between fear and triumph. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was legal. This was real. My phone buzzed. It was my aunt. "They're panicking," she whispered. "They're calling everyone, trying to spin the story, but people don't believe them anymore." I leaned against the wall, staring at the envelope, at the proof that their empire of manipulation was collapsing. "It's too late," I murmured. "The truth is already louder than their lies." Christmas had begun as their show, their perfect stage, but it ended as mine. The spotlight was no longer on their golden child, but on the cracks in their empire. and the audience was no longer family, it was the world. And I knew then, with absolute certainty, this was only the beginning. The courtroom smelled faintly of paper and polish, sterile yet charged with tension. My parents sat stiff on one side, my brother shifting uneasily beside them. Their lawyers whispered frantically, flipping through folders, but nothing could erase the mountain of evidence stacked against them. Emails, bank records, recordings. The judge's voice rang steady, unshaken by the pleas or dramatics. This court finds the transfers and inheritance arrangements invalid due to fraud and coercion. Assets will be reevaluated and divided fairly under state law. The gavel struck, and for the first time in my life, fairness wasn't just a dream, it was law. I looked across the aisle at my brother. His face was pale, jaw clenched, as the judge detailed his new obligations. The investments he had squandered were no longer hidden. The tax debts he had ignored now sat squarely on his shoulders. No safety net, no sister to bleed dry. The golden boy had become the debtor. I should have felt triumphant, but as I watched him slump in his chair, I only felt tired. Justice wasn't fireworks. It was a quiet shift, the scales finally balancing, after years of weight pressing on one side. Still, the show wasn't over. My mother's last act came swiftly. Weeks later, stories spread in whispers. She was ill, gravely so. Cancer, some claimed. Others spoke of her wasting away, too weak to defend herself. At first, I doubted, but then photos surfaced, carefully staged. Pity poured in from neighbors and church members. The narrative twisted, the ungrateful daughter attacking a dying mother. It might have worked. Sympathy is powerful, but lies unravel, especially when you've made a habit of exposing them. One of my allies obtained her medical records. There it was in black and white. No diagnosis, no treatment, no illness. She wasn't dying, she was performing. When the truth surfaced, it didn't just crumble her facade. It shattered whatever trust the community still held for them. The sympathy they begged for turned to disgust. People don't forgive fabricated graves. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, my phone rang. This time I didn't dread the caller. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "This is Rachel Hughes from Channel 7 News. We've been following your case. Would you be willing to share your story on air?" I held the phone to my ear, stunned. From silence to exposure, from scapegoat to headline, my life had become a story the world wanted to hear. But the real satisfaction wasn't in the headlines or the judgment. It was in the quiet. For the first time, I had my own space. My apartment was small, but it was mine. No one barged in, no one demanded, no one drained me dry. I poured a glass of wine, curled into the couch, and listened to the silence. A silence that wasn't empty, but peaceful. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me, tears slipping free, not of sorrow but release. Freedom wasn't loud, it was this. Then late one night, as I scrolled through messages, I found one that stopped me cold. A woman, anonymous, her words raw. "Your story saved me. I read about what you went through, and I finally found the courage to cut off my toxic parents. Thank you for showing me it's possible." I read it 3 times, my chest tightening. My fight hadn't just freed me, it had freed someone else. And in that moment, I realized the impact of truth doesn't end in the courtroom. It ripples outward, touching lives I'll never meet. I set my phone down, staring at the ceiling, whispering into the quiet. Maybe my journey isn't over. Maybe it's only just beginning. The first step was silence, not the suffocating silence of their control, but the intentional silence of my own boundaries. I blocked their numbers, their emails, their endless attempts to claw back into my life. No contact wasn't just a strategy, it was survival. The phone that once terrified me now sat quiet on the table, no longer a weapon. Every ring that never came felt like victory. But silence alone wasn't enough. I had carried their lies for too long. I wanted my voice back. So I began to speak. I bought a cheap microphone, sat in my small apartment, and recorded the first episode of a podcast I named Unburdened. My voice shook as I spoke about inheritance, manipulation, and midnight calls that drained me. I thought no one would listen. But within a week, thousands had. Strangers shared it, left reviews, sent messages. This is my story too. The episodes went viral. Each download another person whispering, "Me too." What once felt like shame became connection, and what once felt like weakness became strength. One night, while editing an episode, I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection of the laptop screen. My hair tied messily, my eyes tired but alive, and I laughed, quiet, genuine laughter. I thought of the girl 5 years ago, answering every call, apologizing for existing, convinced she was the problem. I wished I could hug her, tell her she would survive. Instead, I whispered, "Thank you for holding on." And then came the email. Subject line, "Potential partnership opportunity." I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam. But when I opened it, my hands froze. A reputable investment fund known for supporting social impact projects wanted to sponsor my podcast. They believed my platform could grow, reach more survivors, reshape conversations about financial abuse in families. I leaned back in my chair, breath catching. What began as whispered pain into a microphone was now being seen as something powerful. The possibilities stretched before me, vast and terrifying. Still, even that wasn't enough. Healing wasn't just about me. It was about breaking the cycle. Months later, I launched the Phoenix Fund, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting victims of family financial abuse. The name came easily. From ashes, something new had to rise. With donations from listeners and the backing of my new partners, we created emergency grants, legal aid, counseling networks. I watched as women and men, once voiceless like me, found the courage to step into the light. At the first community meeting, I stood before them, dozens of faces etched with exhaustion but glowing with hope. I told them, "Your pain is real. Your story matters. You are not alone." Their eyes filled with tears, and mine did too. I saw myself in each of them, the fear, the doubt, the longing for freedom. And I knew this was the legacy I wanted, not the one stolen from me, but the one I built from nothing. There were quiet nights still, where I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine, the world hushed outside, and let myself feel everything. The grief for what was lost, the anger at what they tried to do, but also gratitude for the strength I never thought I had, for the strangers who became allies, for the future that was finally mine. Audiences who followed my journey exhaled with me, a collective sigh of relief. They wrote to me, "I cried with you, I cheered for you, I breathed again because of you." Their empathy became my armor, their triumphs my own. Together, we stitched something beautiful out of shredded lives. And when people asked me if I regretted any of it, I told them no. Because without their cruelty, I would never have discovered my strength. Without their betrayal, I would never have built my own family one chosen and true. Without the ashes, I would never have known the fire inside me. I closed one of my podcast episodes with the words that had echoed in my mind since the night everything collapsed. They thought they buried me. They didn't know I was a seed. And as I pressed stop on the recording, I knew it wasn't the end. It was the beginning.